It's been a long, cold, snowy winter so far, but it seems like we're finally getting a break from Mother Nature. Could Ontario groundhog Wiarton Woolley prediction for an early spring come true? I wouldn't put any money on it. A prediction without cold hard data is merely a guess. And speaking of cold hard data, I'm joined by our consumer spending data expert, Sean McCormick, to talk about this year's Valentine's Day spend. Sean, welcome back to Just Good Business.
Good to be back.
Now, Sean, we all know that Valentine's Day is a big day for certain business sectors such as restaurants, florists, and jewelry. How did things pan out this year for Valentine's Day?
Well, we've been digging into Valentine's Day a little bit the last couple of years, and there's a really important conclusion to be drawn, is that Valentine's Day as a shopping event is significant. It's right, the data is all arrows are pointing to Valentine's Day having the same kind of lift effect. It's in the realm of Black Friday, Al.
It's crazy.
When you're looking at week over week data, that's how you assess the impact of a shopping event. Year over year is comparing the impact of the event that year to the impact of the event the year before. But when you look at week over week data, when you look at Valentine's Day on February 14th versus February 7th, so same day of the week, 1 week prior, we saw a 48% lift in total spend. Here's the perspective. Here's the context. Black Friday was 25% increase versus the previous Friday. Wow.
Yeah, that's insane. I would not have put money on Valentine's Day outspending Black Friday.
Well, and there's a lot. There's actually some, people would ask, wow, how can that be true? Well, a couple of things to consider is that right around Black Friday, beginning of November, December, that's typically a higher spending period of the year, right? The fall, people are spending money at a fairly constant rate. In February, consumers are still recoiling from the holidays, right? You've just paid off that Visa and MasterCard. Well, have you paid off or not? Depends on how much you spent in the holidays. But you've just got through that season of eye-watering spending. So January and February, consumers aren't typically spending a lot of money. So the bar is lower, right? So when you get an event like Valentine's Day, which is a call to action, and let's be clear, it is a call to action. If you don't accept that call to action, you must live with the consequences at home, right? So you think about your own spending, right? So let's say you go out and you buy, a dozen roses. Well, the dozen roses at the florist aren't going to cost you $45. They're going to cost you $70.
Right.
That's just the way it is on Valentine's Day. So that's $70 that you wouldn't have spent the Friday before, very likely. You might go out for dinner. So depending on the dinner, that could range, a couple's dinner, it could range from $60 to $660, depending on how, on your propensity to spend on dinner.
Sure.
That's likely $600 to $660. You might not have spent 1 week prior. Let's not forget about the Valentine's Day cards. Have you seen how much a greeting card costs now? Like you're talking $10 to $15.
Yeah.
So that's another 10 to 15 that you weren't spending 1 week prior. Maybe you're buying jewelry. Were you buying jewelry 1 week prior?
No.
So all of that in aggregate leads to what we saw, which is a 48% increase in total spend right across Canada.
It's also a narrower shopping season as well. I mean, when we talked about the holiday season, we're talking 30 to 60 days. Valentine's Day, it's probably a week's worth of shopping that we're looking at, right?
Yeah, and really no other, you talk about calls to action, no other call to action really in January, February, or maybe even March to get consumers out to the stores to spend money. And I mean, it goes beyond. I mean, people don't even think about the grocery spend and how that will increase. You talk about, going out to a restaurant for a romantic dinner. Well, restaurants aren't the only option, especially with restaurant inflation these days. I mean, grocery spend volume on Valentine's Day, Saturday versus the previous Saturday, up 37%.
Oh, wow.
So this is the power of a good shopping event. Yeah. And if you asked me, Al, I think there's an opportunity for merchants and retailers to hitch their wagon to this, to think about beyond the simple roses and chocolates and a dinner for two. Why not? Like, what would be standing in the way of an electronics store having a Valentine's Day sale? You kidding me? If my wife got me a brand new 7.2 channel amplifier for Valentine's Day, that I wouldn't be over the moon for that. It probably costs about the same as a dozen roses on Valentine's Day.
Right.
So there's that.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned restaurants, and that's probably the big winner, right? I mean, this year, things were stacked in favor of restaurants because Valentine's Day landed on a Saturday. So wouldn't that kind of hurt the week over week numbers, because you're kind of comparing 2 days that would normally be busy anyway for restaurants?
Yeah, it's really difficult to increase spend in a restaurant on a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, because the restaurants are typically at capacity Thursday, Friday, Saturday, especially Saturday and Friday. So when you see numbers like a 44% increase in restaurant spend, that was the number.
Yeah.
That can be attributed to bigger bills, right? So you're out for Valentine's Day. It's an occasion. You're not just going out on Saturday night. So then you ask yourself the question, if I usually go out for dinner with my loved one, and it's usually on a Saturday night, am I going to throw caution to the wind and get that, $70 bottle of wine?
Right.
Am I going to maybe have that second or third round of cocktails? People love a good restaurant experience, but they're only going to love a good restaurant experience and maximize on the restaurant experience if it's an occasion. And Valentine's Day is an occasion. And I think with that 44% increase in spend, I mean, think about it. The math's kind of easy. So if you usually spend $100 on a dinner for two, which is pretty easy to do nowadays, what could you do to increase the size of that bill by $40, which, by the way, includes tax and tip?
Right.
So you're probably spending about another $30. Well, what is that? That's an appy and 2 drinks if you're lucky, right? So that's how you get that 44%.
Now, I'm going to assume that the biggest percentage numbers increase we're going to see here would be in florists, because other than weddings and other occasions like that, Valentine's Day would be a focal point for a florist.
Everybody loves to hear how the florists do on Valentine's Day. This makes their year, right? So across Canada, florists spend on Valentine's Day week over week up 457%. So 4.5x.
Yeah.
Some interesting regional variances. Quebec and Atlantic Canada purchasing flowers at a rate that just crushes the rest of the country. So Atlantic Canada, dollar volume, florist was up 861%. So 8.5 times. Quebec plus 711%. So 7 times what you'd see. The lowest increase in Canada, Al, belongs to Ontario at just 366%. So basically half the increase that we saw in Quebec.
Yeah, Ontario and
I know
Ontario
this year. Quebec love to do this, right? So talk amongst yourselves.
And let's look at jewelers, since, the top 3, right? Restaurant, florists, and jewelers. I mean, you mentioned some others now, but those seem to be the top ones. How did the jewelry sector look?
Well, jewelry sector is interesting. So it's difficult to measure jewelry week over week because the dollar value of the purchases is so high. You might get a couple of ballers come in and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on diamonds, and it spikes it. So it's difficult to go week over week. So we looked at year over year data for Valentine's Day in the jewelry sector. And what we saw was actually quite encouraging when you think about, where the consumers have money to spend, disposable income. We saw a 17% increase year over year in jewelry spend this Valentine's Day. So Valentine's Day 25 versus Valentine's Day 24, an increase of 17% year over year.
That's definitely a positive signal in discretionary spend, right? Because jewelry is kind of the epitome of discretionary spend.
Definitely. We commissioned a survey back in the fall, I think it was November, and Canadians were indicating that discretionary spend on things like restaurants, entertainment, and travel were items that they would be reconsidering spend on in the next 6 months. So when you see things like a 17% increase in jewelry year over year on Valentine's Day, it's interesting. But again, that one can be highly influenced by enormous purchases, individual purchases.
You mentioned grocery spend up as well, 37%. Regionally, did you see that it followed the same pattern maybe as the others in terms of who the provincial winners and losers were in this case?
Yeah, so if we look at the total spend number across Canada, I mentioned it being 48%. Slight variances across the country, but not as wide as the florist increases. Quebec leading away with a 63% week over week increase. So for February 14th versus February 7th. And then the lowest was Manitoba at plus 36%. And all of the other provinces were in and around 40 and 50%. Ontario in at plus 52%, BC in at plus 37%, Alberta plus 43%, and Saskatchewan at plus 47%. So it's not as though there were any numbers that would make any of those provinces blush a little bit, but good spending fervor right across the country. Yeah.
No losers, really. All the numbers were pretty good to the positive side. I mean, and I think that bodes well then for maybe our economic outlook for this year, that we're seeing a little bit of stability. I spoke to Chief Economist Douglas Porter last month, and he was cautiously optimistic, right? That the stability in interest rates and in inflation, that we could maybe, start seeing us pulling out of this, hopefully.
Well, there's a middle step in between consumers spending lots of money, like we saw a couple of years ago, lots of disposable income, they're spending it, and consumers not spending any money at all. And that middle step is being thoughtful and discerning about where consumers are spending their money. And consumers right now are still spending money on experiences. They're still spending money on events. It's the spending that is not providing that emotional payback that they're able to pull back on. So I think we're in that middle step right now. Are consumers still spending? Yes. Are they spending the way they were a couple of years ago? No. And the difference is they're being more thoughtful about the purchases and thinking twice, maybe not giving in to impulse the way they might have been 6 months ago.
Sean, if folks wanted to learn more about Moneris Data Services and all the work you guys do, where could they go?
Yeah, monerisdataservices.com. There's lots of information, lots of content on the site. If you ever want to talk about some custom data, let me know.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, as always, Sean.
Thanks, brother.